Daddy's back, you bitches!
Malayo ah!
Daddy's back, you bitches!
That was not very sleep-friendly, was it? Sorry about that, but the rest of the video will be. Every masterpiece in gaming history shares a dirty little secret. The feature you love most, the mechanic that defines the entire experience, the moment that made you fall in love with the game. It almost certainly wasn't planned. It was a bug, a mistake, a catastrophic failure that someone was smart enough not to fix. And no franchise in the history of this industry proves that better than Grand Theft Auto. Because Grand Theft Auto didn't just accidentally invent its own identity. It accidentally invented the entire blueprint that modern open-world gaming is built on. And the story of how that happened is way more interesting than any heist mission Rockstar has ever designed. See, most people think of GTA as this juggernaut that burst onto the scene fully formed, some kind of unstoppable cultural force that was always destined for greatness. But the truth is almost the opposite. Nearly every defining feature of the Grand Theft Auto franchise, from the wanted level system, to the open-world structure, to the satirical tone, to even the way you interact with the world, all of it came from somewhere unexpected. Failures that turned into features, limitations that forced innovation, and a series of happy accidents that collectively built one of the most influential entertainment properties ever created. Not just in gaming, in all of entertainment. So today, I want to walk you through the real story of how Grand Theft Auto was built, but not as a timeline, not as a history lesson. I want to look at it through the lens of design. What went wrong? What went accidentally right? And what lessons every game developer, every creative person, and honestly every person building anything can take away from one of the most improbable success stories in modern media. Let's start at the very beginning, because the origin of GTA teaches us something that most people in creative industries refuse to accept. The best ideas almost never come from trying to build the best idea. They come from tinkering, from messing around, from a group of people who have no business making something great stumbling into greatness, because they were too inexperienced to know what they were doing was supposed to be impossible. In 1984, a handful of computer hobbyists started meeting at a little club in Dundee, Scotland. They called themselves the Kingsway Amateur Computer Club. And that name is important because of the word amateur. These weren't industry veterans. They weren't Silicon Valley prodigies. They were a systems engineering student, a teenager, and a few other guys who just really liked messing with computers. Dave Jones, the unofficial leader of this group, had been tinkering with a game prototype for the ZX Spectrum. And when he decided to shift his focus to the Amiga platform instead, that decision changed everything. Not because the Amiga was inherently superior for every purpose, but because it let him do something specific. It let him render more detailed sprites and create parallax backgrounds that mimicked the feel of arcade games. He built a sci-fi shooter called Menace that felt like something you'd play at the arcade, but could run on a home computer. And a publisher called Psygnosis picked it up. Now here's what matters about this moment. Dave didn't set out to found a legendary game studio. He set out to make one cool game. But when the checks started arriving, something clicked. He realized there was actual money to be made doing this thing that everyone around him considered a hobby. So he rented a tiny office, convinced his friends to quit their day jobs, and founded DMA Design, named, by the way, after a line in a programming manual. Not exactly the stuff of legend, but that's the point. Legendary things rarely start with legendary intentions. They start with someone saying, "Hey, this might actually work." And for the next several years, DMA Design made sci-fi shooters. That was their thing. That was their identity. Until one day, an animator named Scott Johnston started drawing little human characters for one of their projects. Just tiny pixel people. Nothing special. But his colleague Mike Daly thought they were funny. So Mike and another developer named Gary Timmons started animating these little characters, getting into absurd situations, walking off cliffs, getting crushed, doing stupid things. It was a joke, an inside gag between coworkers. But their publisher saw the animations and said, "Make that into a game." That game was Lemmings. And Lemmings sold something like 55,000 copies in a single day, which in 1991 was astronomical. The entire studio's trajectory changed overnight because of what was essentially an office prank. And this is the first major lesson from the GTA story. The ideas that change everything rarely announce themselves as important. They show up disguised as distractions, inside jokes, and side projects that nobody takes seriously, until suddenly everyone does. But here's where the story takes a turn that most people don't know about. After Lemmings became a phenomenon, DMA spent years making sequel after sequel. And then Sony bought Psygnosis, taking the Lemmings property with them. And DMA was suddenly left without a publisher or their most valuable creation. Most studios would have panicked, but the developers at DMA were actually relieved. They were burned out on Lemmings. They were tired of making cute, family-friendly puzzle games. What they really wanted was to make something mature, something violent, something that felt dangerous. And losing Lemmings gave them the freedom to do exactly that. This is another principle that runs through the entire GTA story. Constraint as liberation. Losing their biggest asset didn't destroy DMA. It freed them, and the same pattern would repeat itself over and over throughout the franchise's history. Every time something was taken away, every time a limitation was imposed, every time a plan fell apart, the result was something better than what was originally intended. DMA's first attempt at mature content was a game called Body Harvest for the Nintendo 64. It was ambitious. It was a 3D action-adventure game with violence and dark themes. And Nintendo had initially been excited about it. But here's the problem. Nintendo fell in love with DMA because of Lemmings. They expected cute. They expected charming. And when they got Body Harvest, which was basically the opposite of cute and charming. The relationship fell apart. The game missed its launch window, got published by a different company, and DMA's partnership with Nintendo was effectively dead. Now, most people would look at that as a failure, but what it actually did was establish DMA's identity. They weren't a family-friendly studio pretending to be edgy. They were genuinely drawn to mature content. And that reputation, that willingness to make things that made people uncomfortable, is exactly what attracted their next partners. Enter the Hauser brothers, Sam and Dan. These two were working at BMG Entertainment's experimental gaming division in London. And by their own admission, they didn't think video games were cool. The biggest titles at the time were made for kids. And the Hausers, who came from the world of Hollywood films and music, couldn't get excited about that. But then Dave Jones walked into their office and pitched them something completely different. A game where you play as a criminal, racing around a city, being chased by police. And something about that pitch lit a fire. Not because it was polished, not because it was fully formed, but because it felt like something that didn't exist yet. The game had a working title of Race and Chase, and what happened during its development is probably the single most important accident in open-world gaming history. The original concept was a multiplayer game where one team played as cops and the other played as robbers. Both sides would engage in high-speed pursuits across a city. Sounds fun, right? Except it wasn't. The developers play-tested it for weeks, and they kept running into the same problem. Playing as the cops was absolutely miserable. You had to follow traffic laws. You had to slow down for pedestrians. The pacing was tedious. The whole thing just dragged. So they tried something radical. What if you only played as the criminal? What if there were no rules? And the moment they made that switch, everything changed. Suddenly, the sidewalks weren't obstacles. They were shortcuts. Pedestrians weren't annoyances to avoid. They were targets. And hitting them actually felt satisfying in a chaotic, darkly comedic way. The entire identity of Grand Theft Auto was born from the simple realization that following the rules isn't fun. Breaking them is. But even after finding the right perspective, the game still had problems. The engine that Mike Daly had built was unstable. Bugs everywhere. Constant crashes. The developers were literally drawing city maps by hand on massive sheets of graph paper because the software kept failing. And the missions they designed were boring. Delivery objectives. Go here, drop this off, come back. No excitement. No tension. They tried adding power-ups and wacky weapons, and nothing worked. The game was stale. And then came the accident that defined the entire franchise. During one playtest session, a bug in the AI code caused police vehicles to aggressively ram into the player's car, instead of simply pulling them over. The cop cars were essentially magnetized to the player, smashing into them relentlessly, refusing to give up. It was a glitch. It was unintended behavior. And it was the most fun anyone had experienced in months of development. Instead of fixing the bug, the developers amplified it. They built an entire system around it. Escalating police response, increasingly aggressive pursuit, a wanted level that made the chases more intense the longer you resisted. The entire wanted level system, the mechanic that arguably defines grand theft auto more than any other single feature, was born from broken AI code that nobody intended to write. Think about that for a second. The most iconic mechanic in one of the most successful franchises in entertainment history exists because a programmer made a mistake, and someone on the team was smart enough to recognize that the mistake was more fun than the plan. This is a lesson that extends way beyond game development. In any creative field, the instinct when something goes wrong is to fix it, to get back on track, to restore the original vision. But sometimes the detour is the destination. Sometimes the bug is the feature. The teams that produce truly groundbreaking work aren't the ones that execute their plans flawlessly. They're the ones that recognize when reality is offering them something better than what they imagined, and they have the courage to follow it. Now, GTA's development wasn't just shaped by internal accidents. It was also shaped by an external strategy that was, frankly, genius. Before the game launched, the Hauser brothers hired a publicist to tip off major news outlets about the game's violent and immoral content. It was a deliberate provocation, and the media took the bait completely. Newspapers ran stories warning parents about this shocking new game. Television segments breathlessly described the depravity, and every single one of those stories was essentially a free advertisement to the exact demographic most likely to buy the game. This created a feedback loop that would define GTA's relationship with the public for the next 2 decades. The controversy generated attention. The attention generated sales. The sales validated the approach, and the cycle repeated with every new entry. It's a strategy that seems obvious in retrospect, but in the late 90s, the idea of deliberately courting negative press as a marketing tool was borderline radical. The Hausers understood something that most entertainment companies still struggle with. There's no such thing as bad publicity when your target audience views the outrage as a badge of honor. The original Grand Theft Auto launched in 1997, and while critics weren't exactly blown away, the camera was awkward, the visuals were dated, the gameplay could be frustrating. It sold over 1 million copies. The controversy worked. The concept resonated, and both DMA and their publisher knew they had something worth building on. But what happened next is where a lot of franchises go wrong, and where GTA almost went wrong too. The sequel, GTA 2, released in 1999, and it made a classic mistake. It played it safe. The setting shifted to a generic futuristic dystopia. The developers added a reputation system and a few new weapons. But fundamentally, it was the same game with a fresh coat of paint. And audiences noticed. Sales slowed. Reviews were lukewarm. The expansion packs set in 1960s London that came out around the same time similarly failed to innovate. The franchise was in danger of becoming irrelevant. And this is where we hit another critical turning point. Dave Jones, the founder of DMA, recognized that the studio was at a crossroads. Take-Two Interactive had acquired them, and he knew that if he stayed, he'd be making GTA games indefinitely. So he left, and his departure, which could have been catastrophic for the franchise, turned out to be another one of those disguised blessings, because the person who replaced him was Leslie Benzies, a self-taught programmer who had joined the studio to work on a quirky N64 game, and proved himself to be exactly the kind of creative leader GTA needed for its next evolution. Leslie and his team were given a task that seemed almost impossible. Take the top-down, arcade-style Grand Theft Auto formula and translate it into a fully 3D experience for the PlayStation 2. They had access to a game engine called Renderware, which had proven itself capable with racing games, but cramming the complexity of a city simulation into a 3D world on hardware that wasn't designed for it was a completely different challenge. The technical breakthrough they achieved is still one of the most important innovations in open-world game design. They developed a streaming solution that effectively loaded the environment off the disk around the player's position, rendering only what was nearby in full detail, while keeping the rest of the world accessible in the background. This meant players could drive through an enormous, interconnected city without hitting a loading screen. It sounds simple now, because every open-world game does some version of this. But in 2001, nobody had pulled it off at this scale on a home console. And the technique that Leslie Benzies and programmer Adam Fowler and artist Aaron Garbut pioneered became the foundational technology for every GTA game that followed. And honestly, it influenced the streaming architecture of most open-world games across the entire industry. But the technical innovation alone isn't what made GTA 3 a revolution. What made it a revolution was the combination of technology, design philosophy, and tone, all coming together in a way that nobody had seen before. The writers, including Dan Houser, penned a story with actual characters, voiced by real actors, captured with motion capture technology that the studio had invested in years earlier. The world was designed not just as a playground for chaos, but as a living, breathing parody of American society, complete with absurd billboards, ridiculous radio stations, and pedestrians who said the most outrageous things as you walked past them. And this is where GTA crystallized something that I think is underappreciated in discussions about game design. It wasn't just an open-world action game. It was a satire engine. Every element of the world, from the talk radio shows to the store names to the way police behaved, was designed to lampoon something specific about American culture. The violence wasn't gratuitous for its own sake. It was part of a larger comedic framework that held up a funhouse mirror to the society it was depicting. And the fact that so many critics and politicians completely missed this satirical intent actually became part of the satire itself. The outraged reactions, were exactly the kind of knee-jerk moral panic that the game was mocking. GTA 3 launched in October 2001, right after the September 11th attacks, which forced last-minute changes to the game. Emergency vehicle designs were altered, plane physics were modified, the city skyline was adjusted, even the box art was redesigned, resulting in the comic book collage style that became iconic. These were painful, rushed modifications made under enormous emotional and commercial pressure. And yet, once again, the constraints produced something memorable. That collage cover art became the visual identity of the franchise. The game was a phenomenon. Critics praised its unprecedented freedom and attention to detail. Sales records were shattered, and the controversy machine kicked into overdrive, with politicians from both sides of the political spectrum using GTA 3 as evidence that video games were corrupting America's youth. None of this hurt sales. If anything, every congressional hearing and news segment condemning the game pushed it further into the cultural mainstream. What Rockstar North, as DMA had now been renamed, did next was arguably even more impressive than creating GTA 3. They took what could have been a formulaic sequel and instead used it as an opportunity to prove that the GTA formula wasn't limited to one setting or one time period. Vice City, released barely 9 months after GTA 3, transported players to a neon-soaked interpretation of 1980s Miami. And what's remarkable about Vice City, from a design perspective, is how thoroughly the setting informed every aspect of the experience. This wasn't just a reskin. The Art Deco architecture, the pastel color palette, the pop music radio stations, the clothing styles, the car models, everything was meticulously researched and designed to evoke a specific cultural moment. The game's protagonist, Tommy Vercetti, was voiced by Ray Liotta and explicitly modeled after characters from Scarface and Miami Vice. Even the heads-up display used an aqua and hot pink color scheme. Vice City proved something crucial about open-world game design that remains true today. Setting isn't just a backdrop. It's a game mechanic. The 1980s Miami theme didn't just look different from Liberty City. It felt different to play in. The broader streets encouraged faster driving. The water surrounding the islands incentivized boat and helicopter use. The flashy nightlife culture gave context to the property ownership system, where players could buy businesses and watch them generate income. Every design decision was filtered through the question, does this feel like Miami in the 80s? And when the answer was yes, it created a cohesiveness that GTA 3 never quite achieved. The development team also recognized a problem with GTA 3's story pacing and attempted to fix it with mixed results. Vice City's third act essentially gates the finale behind purchasing enough business properties and completing their side missions. By modern standards, this would be seen as artificial padding. But in 2002, the open-world format was still novel enough that most players had already explored these side activities before reaching that point. It's a reminder that game design doesn't exist in a vacuum. What feels like a flaw in one era might be invisible in another, and vice versa. Then came San Andreas, and this is where Rockstar's ambition started to border on the absurd. The goal was to recreate not one city, but three, plus all the rural wilderness connecting them, on the same PlayStation 2 hardware that could barely handle one city smoothly. The technical solution was elegant, a new rendering pipeline that converted distant objects into low-polygon versions and only loaded full detail when the player got close. This allowed the art team to create a world that was, by some measures, larger than the previous two games combined. But the scale of San Andreas isn't really what makes it significant from a design perspective. What makes it significant is the sheer density of systems layered on top of each other. Role-playing mechanics let players customize their character's appearance, fitness level, and skill stats. A territory control system turned the streets of Los Santos into an ongoing gang war. A dating simulation let players take girlfriends to restaurants and monitor their happiness. You could gamble in casinos, fly planes, ride bicycles, break into houses, and do yoga, all within the same game. San Andreas was Rockstar testing the boundaries of what open world could mean. And the answer, apparently, was everything. The kitchen sink approach worked commercially. The game sold tens of millions of copies, but it also revealed a tension in open-world design that persists to this day. When you give players unlimited freedom and endless systems, the narrative focus can suffer. San Andreas's story is excellent in its early hours, grounded in a specific cultural experience of 1990s gang life. But by the midpoint, the protagonist is infiltrating government facilities and flying jetpacks, and the tonal whiplash can be jarring. This tension between player freedom and narrative cohesion would become the central design challenge for every GTA game that followed. And it's a challenge that the industry as a whole is still grappling with. How do you tell a focused, emotionally resonant story when the player can wander off at any moment to play golf or cause a 5-star police chase? And then, of course, there was hot coffee. For those unfamiliar, a modder discovered unused code in the PC version of San Andreas that contained a crude, sexual minigame. It was inaccessible without modifying the game files, but its mere existence in the code triggered a political firestorm. Senator Hillary Clinton pushed for legislation. The ESRB retroactively changed the game's rating. Rockstar faced class action lawsuits and millions in losses. It was the first time the franchise had taken a genuine, tangible hit from controversy rather than benefiting from it. The hot coffee incident is significant because it drew a line that the industry hadn't clearly defined before. Violence, even extreme violence, had always been somewhat tolerated in gaming because it existed within an established tradition of action entertainment. But sexual content crossed a cultural boundary that triggered a fundamentally different kind of backlash. Right or wrong, the incident forced the entire industry to reckon with where the limits actually were. Not in terms of creative expression, but in terms of what the regulatory and retail infrastructure would tolerate. After San Andreas, Rockstar faced another one of those forced innovation moments. Electronic Arts purchased the studio that made the renderware engine, effectively cutting off GTA's technological foundation. Once again, losing something critical turned out to be transformative. Rockstar San Diego had been developing their own proprietary engine called Rage, the Rockstar Advanced Game Engine, which incorporated a physics simulation technology called Euphoria that could generate incredibly lifelike character animations in real time. This engine, born out of necessity, would power not just the next GTA, but also Red Dead Redemption and every major Rockstar title since. GTA IV, which launched in 2008, represents the most dramatic tonal shift in the franchise's history, and it's a shift that divided the fan base in ways that still echo today. The game's creative director, Dan Houser, had been watching the evolution of storytelling in games and film, and decided that GTA needed to grow up, not in terms of content. The series had always been mature in that sense, but in terms of emotional depth. He wanted players to actually care about the protagonist, to feel the weight of his choices, to experience something closer to a character study than an action movie. The result was Niko Bellic, an Eastern European immigrant arriving in Liberty City with a traumatic past, and a cousin who lied about his success in America. Niko's story wasn't about climbing a criminal empire. It was about disillusionment, the myth of the American dream, and the way violence follows people who try to escape it. The writing was sharper, the performances were more nuanced, and the satirical elements, while still present, were woven more subtly into the world rather than being played purely for laughs. But this tonal shift had gameplay consequences that weren't universally welcomed. The driving physics were deliberately heavy and realistic. Cars had genuine weight and momentum, making the wild chases of previous games more challenging and less immediately fun. The Euphoria physics system meant Niko would stumble, trip, and ragdoll in ways that felt authentic, but could also feel clumsy during tense moments. Many of the over-the-top features from San Andreas, the jetpacks, the territory wars, the RPG stat systems, were stripped out in favor of a more grounded experience. GTA IV earned the highest review scores of any game in the franchise and remains one of the highest rated games ever made. But in the years since, a vocal segment of the fan base has argued that it sacrificed fun for realism. And this debate gets at something fundamental about game design philosophy. Is the purpose of a game to be fun above all else? Or can a game aspire to be something more, an emotional experience, a piece of social commentary, an artistic statement? Even if that means some moment-to-moment gameplay feels less immediately satisfying. There's no universally correct answer. But the fact that GTA IV provoked the question at all speaks to how far the franchise had come from its origins as a buggy, top-down driving game. The series had evolved from pure mechanical entertainment into something that could meaningfully participate in cultural conversations about immigration, the American dream, and the nature of violence. GTA IV also introduced something that would become enormously important for the franchise's future: a multiplayer free mode that let players loose in the open world together. By modern standards, it was primitive. There was nothing to do except drive around and fight each other. Character customization was minimal, but it planted a seed. It proved that the GTA world was fun to share with other people, and that seed would eventually grow into one of the most profitable entertainment products ever created. The 2 expansion packs for GTA IV, The Lost and Damned, and The Ballad of Gay Tony, deserve recognition for doing something that no other game franchise had really attempted at that scale. They told the same story from 3 different perspectives, with events in one campaign directly impacting what happened in another. A car explosion in Nico's story would be glimpsed in Johnny's biker campaign. A diamond deal gone wrong would ripple across all 3 narratives. It was a narrative experiment that demonstrated the untapped potential of interconnected storytelling in games. And it's an idea that surprisingly few developers have tried to replicate since. And then there was Chinatown Wars, the Nintendo DS title that almost nobody played, but almost everyone who did loved. It returned to the top-down perspective, introduced a brilliant drug trading economy system, and earned some of the highest review scores of any game on the platform. But it sold terribly, and its commercial failure essentially killed portable GTA development entirely. The lesson there is painful, but real critical quality and commercial success don't always correlate, especially when your audience has specific expectations about what your product should look and feel like. By the time GTA V entered development, the landscape had shifted dramatically. Red Dead Redemption had proven that the GTA formula could work brilliantly in a completely different setting. Max Payne 3 had refined Rockstar's approach to combat mechanics, and the rise of online gaming, social media, and streaming culture had created an entirely new context for how people consumed games. They weren't just playing alone in their bedrooms anymore. They were broadcasting, sharing clips, creating content, building communities around the games they loved. Dan Houser's approach to GTA V's story reflected this new reality. Instead of one protagonist, there would be 3, each representing a different type of GTA player. Michael was the veteran, the retired criminal who'd already achieved success and was bored with it. Trevor was the chaos agent, the player who ignores the missions and just wants to blow things up. And Franklin was the newcomer, starting from nothing and working his way up. The idea was that no matter how you preferred to play GTA, one of these characters would resonate with you. The technical achievement of making this work was staggering. When you switched between characters outside of missions, the game would show the character you were leaving going about their own life, creating an illusion that these were real people with real routines that continued when you weren't watching. Michael might be arguing with his family. Trevor might be waking up in a ditch, somewhere wearing nothing but his underwear. Franklin might be walking his dog. These transitions required hundreds of unique scripted moments, all designed to maintain the fantasy of a living world. GTA V's map was the largest and most detailed in the franchise's history, incorporating a sprawling urban metropolis and a vast rural wilderness that included mountains, deserts, forests, and small towns. The attention to detail was staggering. You could ride a roller coaster at the pier, browse a satirical internet on your in-game phone, watch fully produced television shows in your apartment, play a round of golf, go scuba diving, invest in the stock market, or just drive around listening to one of the most expertly curated soundtracks in gaming history. The game launched in September 2013 and shattered every sales record that existed. It made over $1 billion in its first 3 days, faster than any entertainment product in history, including any film, book, or album. The critical reception was nearly unanimous praise, and the scale of its cultural impact was something the industry had never seen before. But GTA V's single-player campaign, as massive and polished as it was, turned out to be the prologue to a much bigger story. Grand Theft Auto Online launched a few weeks after the main game, and it fundamentally changed what the franchise meant to both its developers and its audience. At launch, GTA Online was rough. Servers crashed constantly. The content was thin, some races, some death matches, some basic cooperative missions. Players could accumulate money and buy apartments and vehicles, but there wasn't much to actually do with them. The promised heist missions, the co-op bank robberies that had been the centerpiece of the marketing, were nowhere to be found. The reception was mixed at best. What happened over the next several years is one of the most remarkable transformations in gaming history. Rockstar kept adding content, not small patches, massive, free content updates that introduced entirely new gameplay systems. Heists finally arrived in 2015 and gave players elaborate multi-part missions with setup phases and big finales. Then came business empires. Players could buy and operate drug operations, gun-running facilities, nightclubs, and vehicle import businesses. Then military hardware, because apparently what Los Santos needed was flying motorcycles with homing missiles. Then casino gambling. Then submarine-based heists on tropical islands. Each update layered more systems on top of the existing ones, creating an increasingly complex and chaotic multiplayer sandbox. The financial engine powering all of this was shark cards, microtransactions that let players convert real money into in-game currency. And whatever you think about microtransactions ethically, the shark card system accomplished something unprecedented. It funded years of continuous content development, without requiring players to pay for traditional DLC. The trade-off was that the in-game economy was designed to be deliberately grindy, creating constant pressure to spend real money to skip the tedium. This design philosophy drew enormous criticism, but it also generated enormous revenue, billions of dollars, over the life of the product. GTA Online essentially became a live service game before that term was common, and its success fundamentally altered Rockstar's business model and arguably the trajectory of the entire franchise. Single-player DLC for GTA V, which had been widely expected, never materialized. The resources that might have gone toward expanding Michael, Trevor, and Franklin's story were redirected to the perpetual content pipeline feeding GTA Online. For players who primarily valued the narrative single-player experience, this was a significant loss. For players who loved the multiplayer sandbox, it was an ongoing gift. And for Rockstar's accountants, it was an unqualified triumph. The broader industry took notice. The success of GTA Online's live service model influenced countless games that followed, for better and worse. It demonstrated that a well-maintained multiplayer sandbox could generate revenue for years beyond a game's initial release. But it also contributed to an industry-wide shift toward games-as-service models that prioritized ongoing monetization over self-contained creative experiences. A shift that has drawn plenty of legitimate criticism. Now, stepping back from the chronological story, I want to talk about the broader design principles that emerge when you look at GTA's evolution as a whole, because I think there are patterns here that apply to creative work far beyond game development. The first principle is that innovation usually comes from constraint, not abundance. DMA Design didn't have the resources or technology to build the game they originally envisioned. So they built something different. And that something different turned out to be more interesting. They couldn't make the cop gameplay fun. So they removed the cops as playable characters and invented the wanted system instead. They couldn't fix the AI bugs, so they turned the bugs into features. They couldn't keep using renderware, so they built Rage. Over and over, the franchise's most important breakthroughs came from having something taken away and being forced to find an alternative. The second principle is that tone is a design choice, not a decoration. GTA's satirical tone isn't just window dressing. It's structurally integrated into every aspect of the experience. The radio stations aren't just background music. They're satirical commentary that contextualizes the world. The billboard ads and store names aren't just scenery. They're jokes that reward attentive players. The pedestrian dialogue and talk show banter aren't just ambient noise. They're the connective tissue that makes the world feel like a coherent satirical universe. Studios that try to replicate GTA's formula without understanding this often end up with games that feel like GTA clones. They have the open world and the vehicles and the weapons, but they're missing the voice, the attitude, the point of view that ties it all together. The third principle is that the relationship between realism and fun is not zero-sum, but it requires constant calibration. GTA IV leaned hard into realism and earned critical acclaim, but divided the fanbase. GTA V pulled back toward over-the-top action and became the best-selling game of its generation. Neither approach is inherently correct. The key is understanding what your audience needs at that particular moment and calibrating accordingly. GTA's designers have been remarkably good at reading the room across different eras, giving players grounded drama when they seemed ready for it, and giving them jetpacks and flying cars when they wanted to let loose. The fourth principle is that controversy is a double-edged sword, and the edge matters. GTA's deliberate courting of controversy worked brilliantly for the franchise's commercial success. But the hot coffee incident showed that there are limits, not artistic limits, but practical ones related to the regulatory and commercial infrastructure your product exists within. The developers at Rockstar pushed boundaries relentlessly, and most of the time that pushing generated free publicity and cultural cachet. But when they pushed past a specific threshold, the consequences were real and expensive. Understanding where that line is and whether it's worth crossing is one of the hardest judgments any creative team has to make. The fifth principle, and maybe the most important one, is that great creative work often comes from people who don't fit the expected profile. Grand Theft Auto, the definitive American satire in gaming. The franchise that more than any other captures the chaos and absurdity and dark humor of American culture, was made by Scottish developers. Think about that. A team in Edinburgh and Dundee crafted the most biting, most commercially successful, most culturally pervasive commentary on American life that the gaming industry has ever produced. Sometimes being an outsider isn't a disadvantage. It's the advantage. The distance gives you perspective. The unfamiliarity forces you to research and observe rather than rely on assumptions. The lack of insider status frees you from the unwritten rules about what you're supposed to say and how you're supposed to say it. Now, let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in the GTA conversation: the human cost. The development of these games, particularly from San Andreas onward, involved punishing work schedules. The collaborative multi-studio model that Rockstar adopted meant that hundreds, or sometimes thousands of developers across multiple countries were working in concert, often under extreme pressure. Reports of mandatory overtime or crunch have followed the company for years. The departure of key figures like Dan Houser and Leslie Benzies, the writer and producer, respectively, who were arguably most responsible for the franchise's creative direction, raised real questions about whether the creative culture that produced these games was sustainable. This matters because it connects to a larger conversation about how the entertainment industry treats the people who make its most profitable products. GTA V is the second best-selling video game of all time. GTA Online has generated billions in recurring revenue. And yet the conditions under which these products were made have been criticized as exploitative. There's an uncomfortable tension between celebrating the artistic achievement of these games and acknowledging the working conditions that produced them. And any honest assessment of GTA's legacy has to reckon with both sides. Looking at where the franchise stands today, the picture is fascinating and uncertain. GTA V and GTA Online continue to generate staggering revenue more than a decade after launch. The game has been re-released across 3 console generations, but the key creative figures who define the franchise's voice, Hauser's writing, Benzie's production oversight, are gone. The remaining leadership, including Aaron Garbut and Rob Nelson, are extremely talented. But the voice of a franchise isn't just about talent. It's about a specific combination of perspectives, obsessions, and creative instincts that are impossible to perfectly replicate when the people who embodied them leave. There's also the broader question of what GTA means in a media landscape that has changed almost beyond recognition since the last mainline entry launched. In 2013, social media was still relatively nascent. Streaming culture was in its infancy. The relationship between games and their audiences was fundamentally different. A new GTA has to navigate a world where every frame will be dissected on social media, where streamers will broadcast every moment to millions of viewers, where cultural sensitivities have shifted in ways that make the kind of broad satirical comedy GTA is known for both more relevant and more difficult to execute. And this might be the franchise's ultimate test. Can it evolve again? Can it find a new creative voice that captures the same lightning-in-a-bottle quality of its predecessors, while speaking to a different cultural moment? History suggests it can. This is, after all, a franchise built entirely on reinvention, on turning setbacks into breakthroughs, on finding gold in the wreckage of failed plans. But history also tells us that nothing lasts forever. Every franchise eventually reaches a point where the formula calcifies, where the innovations stop coming, where the audience's expectations become impossible to exceed. The question isn't whether GTA will face that moment. The question is whether the people now steering the ship will recognize it when it arrives and have the courage to break everything apart and start again. Just like a bunch of amateurs in a computer club in Dundee did 4 decades ago, when they didn't even know they were building something that would change the world. So what's the takeaway from all of this? It's not just a story about a video game franchise. It's a story about how breakthrough creative work actually happens, not through meticulous planning, not through flawless execution, but through a messy, chaotic process of accidents, failures, forced adaptations, and the willingness to recognize when something unexpected is more valuable than what you originally intended. Grand Theft Auto didn't succeed because everything went right. It succeeded because so many things went wrong, and the people involved were smart enough, adaptable enough, and stubborn enough to turn every setback into the next breakthrough. And that, more than any heist or car chase or wanted level, is the real story worth telling about Grand Theft Auto. If you found this breakdown valuable, drop a comment with the design decision from GTA's history that surprised you the most. I'd love to hear what resonated. And if you want more deep dives into the design philosophy behind gaming's most influential franchises, subscribe and hit that bell so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.